Now remember, we're already building Mickey Land in Anaheim at this point. And so this is more kind of a courtesy visit. And Michael was very polite. He looked at everything, but just before he left the meeting, turned toward us and said, all that Winnie the Pooh stuff, I need you to make it Roger Rabbit instead.
All right, so now you're standing in a smoking crater of what was once supposed to be the 100-acre wood portion of Mickey's Toontown project. The Disneyland expansion thing still had a locked-in launch date of January 1993, which at this point is what, like a year, 14 months away? What do you think?
Well, I was thinking that given everything, things could be worse.
Could have been worse in the way that things could have been worse for the Titanic because like 700 people lived?
Well, you see, by this time, I've been working with Michael Eisner, well, for a few years, and I knew he was capable of, well, he changed his mind sometimes a lot.
So, Jim Shull, how do we go from Winnie the Pooh then to Roger Rabbit?
You know, it was lots of movie watching and eating lots of sugary snacks. By the first, I mean, we started watching Roger Rabbit repeatedly over and over, very, very closely. We were looking for that one single specific moment in that movie that we could use as a hook for an entire major dark ride that was anchoring this entire new land. We found our hook about 2/3 of the way into the movie. There's that scene where Eddie Valiant and Jessica Rabbit are driving in Benny the Cab as they're leaving Toontown, and they're going right through the Hollywood Tunnel. Well, you know the villain, Judge Doom? Well, he spills a barrel of dip in the roadway just ahead of them. And as Benny drives across the dip, well, he starts to spin, and finally smashing into a light pole.
This is maybe a second out of the movie. Get it? But maybe 2 seconds, but that's it.
And so we've built an entire e-ticket around 30 frames of one movie that lasted 2 hours.
E-ticket? Well, if I'm going to be completely honest here and lay my cards on the table, I'm going to say that, you know, Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin is really more of a D ticket. But yeah, you know, you're all right. That brief moment from the original Roger Rabbit movie was just enough of a hook for us to design our spinning ride around.
Ooh, okay. So speaking of source material, Mickey's Birthdayland in Florida was obviously the inspiration for Mickey's Toontown in California. But what other ideas got carried over between the two lands?
Although we wanted to change the California version of Mickey Mouse's house for a couple of reasons. The first was that guests would meet Mickey in his house and not in a theater as it is in the Magic Kingdom. In Florida, Mickey's house is really just part of an extended queue for the Birthdayland show, which is the show that ran all of 3 times a day. And that was the major draw. That was the reason most people went to the Birthdayland.
Yeah, and that the issue with that was is like 600 or 700 people per show.
But here's the thing: the tent had to have a large capacity, and that's because the show inside of the tent was Mickey Birthdayland's main attraction. The Mickey Meet and Greet, which was located right next door in the Hollywood Theater, well, that was the secondary attraction. In Anaheim, it was decided by the park there would be no need for a theater in Mickey Land because Disneyland already had a plan in motion to transform the original Videopolis outdoor amphitheater. It was going to be their character show theater at Disneyland. However, knowing the park was going to create a theater right next door in Fantasyland, well, that kind of removed any need for us to build another theater over in Toontown.
Okay, no theater for Toontown, got that. But there would still be rides, right?
This land would have the Roger Rabbit cartoon spin and the Gadget GoCoaster, but it was first and foremost Meet Mickey Land. I mean, his name was going to be on the door. And I really wanted to lift the Meet Mickey attraction from being just a good guest experience into something genuinely great. And to make it great, we started to research decades of Mickey cartoons.
Jim Shull, hold on a second. You're hired by the Walt Disney Company. You've been working there for decades. I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with the corporate icon Mickey Mouse. This sounds kind of like a little make-work project, a little boondoggle. perhaps to maybe sit down every afternoon with some milk duds and watch Mickey Mouse cartoons. And I'm not saying that in a bad way.
I know you're saying it in the most sincere and loving way you possibly could. And I did try. I mean, my deep dive into Mickey's career started with Mickey first arriving in Hollywood. I wanted to find the date because I wanted to create a logical structure for why that house is there in Anaheim. Because Mickey arrived on the scene in 1928. We started building a backstory that because he made his films in Hollywood, he had to live in Hollywood. And so sometime in like the late 1920s, 1930s, we built this logic and story that he came to California, bought a house, and he bought a house in the most popular style of the time, which was American Craftsman.
Jim Shull, were there any specific examples of craftsman architecture that you guys looked at? Any specific homes?
Well, I kind of cheated on this one, Len. Because I knew someone who just so happened to live in a craftsman style house. The very era we selected for Mickey's house, that was a house my mother-in-law. She lived in Wichita Falls, Texas.
So Mickey's house in Disneyland Park is based on your mother-in-law's house in Texas.
That's exactly what I'm telling you. And there's a story behind my choice. When you look at the one for Mickey's house in Florida, it was really straight lines. I didn't want to do that. And when you start with American Craftsman, it's straight lines, but it actually has kind of a bulbous look to it. Because as an Imagineer, I'm always thinking, I'm always looking for inspiration. And during the time I was designing Mickey's house, well, I was already scheduled to travel to Texas for a family event.
All right. So I'm thinking, Jim, this story is going to veer in one of two ways. Either your mother-in-law lived in a ramshackle house or there was moonshine. So involved. Which elements did you get from your mother-in-law's house?
Well, I kept asking my dear mother-in-law, Mary Jim, to stand aside and as I took photographs of her washing machine, and good-naturedly she'd do that. And I did a lot of other documentation, so much so that if you ever make it out to 1710 and walk inside her house, you'll find some very familiar items that made their way into Anaheim.
This wasn't a case of just cutting and pasting. I mean, you still need to do tune versions of, as you mentioned, the washing machine or the furniture or the other objects in our house. And this involved the creation of a lot of handmade, custom-built props for the Toontown project, right?
Well, yeah, because you start with something, you think, oh, this will be a piece of cake. And then you wake up the next day and you realize, oh, I need to cut, sculpt, and hand paint over 2,000 custom props that are in Mickey's house. The props include everything from Mickey's washing machine, his three-fingered gloves, his golf clubs, his hat. Everything had to be handmade. Nothing could be bought. I would keep drawing, sketches of a prop I needed, and someone would take that sketch, and suddenly I would be called in to review the prop they'd actually built and were about to paint. But the fact is we needed to build over 2,000 props because we'd committed to bring the world of Roger Rabbit and Toontown to life. For example, if you recall that moment when Eddie Valiant first steps into Toontown, well, he discovers there isn't a straight line to be found in the entire city. All the buildings there bulge a little bit.
Oh, squash and stretch.
Squash and stretch, exactly. And that gave us an idea of what we needed to do, but it made it really challenging for the people who actually had to draw the building plans that would be used to build from. No one builds a building like the ones we wanted to build. As soon as I started to send architects my concept drawings, what I got back from them were building drawings that they had straightened out all the lines I'd just drawn. I mean, all those like wacky, stretchy, squashy lines. They'd give me back some beautiful drawings. Everything was angled and straight and etc.
And at the top is stapled in Alcoholics Anonymous meeting pamphlet. Like, hey, I just happen to have this.
Yeah, I just happen to have it. But I'd look at them. They were, they were experts. They had degrees in architecture. They knew what they were doing. They were certified in the state of California. And I was about to certify them in a different way. Because I rolled up the drawings, I walked down the hall, and I asked them, why were they doing this? Why did they change all my drawings? They thought for a moment, they canvassed among themselves. They asked themselves, should we tell them? And they decide to. They thought, well, Jim, they said, we thought you just couldn't draw.
It's not far from my idea. I'm just saying. That's great. What is this guy doing? What? You talk to him. No, you talk to him. We'll just send him back the drawings. We know what he needs.
And Len, I really did feel kind of sorry for the architects because I didn't realize that no one had ever asked them to design buildings without straight lines. And what I was giving them was drawings where there wasn't a single straight line. It was all pure squash and stretch, just like the cartoons. The practical part of me found a solution. I just moved my desk down into their bullpen, and I would work right next to them every day for 3-4 months, day by day, going through every single drawing. They would take one of my drawings, draw it. I'd mark it up with red line, send it back to them, and eventually we ended up with a building set. Another discovery we made is that Disneyland is, well, frankly, a working theme park. And in order to meet Mickey and for that attraction to operate it was going to require a 2-story building.
Well, of course it's a 2-story building. You can see the set of stairs. You come through the door, and they lead up to the second floor from Mickey's living room. You even put in a doggy door with Pluto on it.
You're so nearly correct, Jim. This close. But that's not the second floor I'm talking about. Allow me to let you in on a little secret. Many times in a Disney park, when you think you're on the ground level of an attraction, there's really another floor directly below you. And so it is with Meet Mickey. Guests never know that when they step into his house, that everything required to operate the attraction is directly below them. The lower floor of that building is where the cast member break room is located. And it's also where all of Mickey's costumes are kept.
I've always heard if you step into the living room, this is the first time that Disney uses a soft queue in a theme park.
Ooh, Jim, why don't you explain what a soft queue is?
I mean, by definition, when you enter any queue, any Disney park queue, it has switchbacks, it has railings, and that's a classic hard queue. It's a hard queue because you kind of find yourself shuffling along, like a zombie, behind the guest, directly in front of you, as you wait to enter a show building or board the ride vehicle.
Yes, I usually say "boo" as I do it, but we've all had a similar experience in a Disney park. Okay.
And Len, that's exactly the kind of experience I didn't want the guests to have when they visited Mickey's house. Because once they stepped into Mickey's house, what I wanted them to be in is a real house. And there are no queue rails in a real house. You don't have them, I suspect. I know I don't. My mother-in-law is still out, we'll talk for another time. But I wanted the guests to be able to walk and make themselves at home in Mickey's house. They could step out of the soft queue, let other people pass by as they sit back and relax in Mickey's chair, look at the books in the bookcase, check his laundry on the rack, basically, tour his house as if they were going to buy it. So as a result, there could be no chains. There could be no railings in this room or any of the rooms in Mickey's house to keep the guests in line. They could stay as long as they'd like, and that is why we called it a soft queue.
This soft queue extends out of the house. I mean, once you go through the laundry room and head out to the greenhouse in the backyard with its carrot eating gopher, this continues right up to Mickey's movie barn, right?
Yeah, I think it is. And the thing that I love about this, Jim, and I didn't know it had an official name or that it was intentionally designed that way, but I remember doing exactly what you said in Mickey's house, and I believe in Minnie's house too. You'd go in the kitchen and you could walk around the table and look at the refrigerator and what's posted on the refrigerator and stuff. And that was genius because number one, you were doing something, you were in line, right? But to your point, you could let other people go ahead of you if you wanted to explore, or if you were in a hurry and just wanted to meet the characters, you could just make a beeline through the house. That's super interesting.
And that's the idea. You want to take people off the clock and take away the feeling that they're being pushed through the attraction. Let them step out of line and explore and discover on their own.
Yeah, and you didn't get to the real railings until, the barn, right?
There's both a reason and purpose for that. The transition from the soft to classic hard queue was to allow the cast members who operated the meet and greet portion of Mickey's house to arrange the guests into groups of 8. Each group of 8 then would enter Mickey's dressing room to see Mickey while he's taking a break from making a movie.
Okay, I don't think we want to give away too much of the stagecraft here around meeting Mickey.
Moving film Rex.
All right, Jim. But you never know that something fishy was going on here, because as you and your group are being staged to meet Mickey, there are also other guests in other parts of the barn who are doing the exact same thing, who are already meeting with Mickey, right?
You're right again. And that brings us back to when I was originally designing Mickey's house. Part of the design process meant that I had to meet with an industrial engineer and explain to her how many guests per hour I wanted to experience this part of Toontown. Well, she did some quick calculations and she came back to me with a report that said, if you want X number of people in this much space per hour, you're going to need X number of Mickeys working at exactly the same time. A lot of math.
Now, they did the same thing in Florida, right? They had multiple Mickeys meeting with guests at the exact same time at different parts of the Hollywood theater.
Those Mickeys were cheating because they dressed all exactly the same in the same dressing rooms to meet their guests, and I didn't want to do that. I thought that was too easy and not special enough. So I wanted was when a guest would meet Mickey Mouse in his house at Disneyland and step into the movie barn, they would meet their Mickey on one of 4 different film sets.
What were the 4 films?
Steamboat Willie, the band concert, Through the Mirror, and of course, Fantasia.
And what was really great about each of these individual rooms was they were dressed as if they were the actual set for that short. By that I mean the Steamboat Willie room had a steamboat inside of it, and Through the Mirror had an oversized Alice in Wonderland themed props. It was pretty wild.
I gotta say, I mean, the commitment to 4 different films and 4 different themes when you could have really gone with one is a really big commitment, and I applaud that. That's a good idea, Jim.
Since you brought up the subject of time, can you please talk about what happened? This would have been 6 months or so after Michael had asked that the 100-acre woods be swapped out for a Roger Rabbit themed area.
Mickey Steinberg was a really big part of Imagineering back in the 1990s. He was directly responsible for the creation and success and the building and construction of Euro Disneyland. Mickey Steinberg was a perfect choice when the company decided to build Euro Disneyland because he just wasn't going to be intimidated by multi-billion-dollar projects like Euro Disneyland. To kind of quote Mickey, what he'd say often over and over again was, you know, a building's a building.
was Mr. Steinberg from the South?
That he was, Len. He
was
a true Southern gentleman. I'm sitting there in a meeting at WDI in Glendale with Mickey and Michael Eisner, and we're in a conference room that overlooks dimensional design. And that's the place in Imagineering where designers sit and build. I mean, they build everything in miniature that gets built into the parks. And as this particular meeting was drawing to a close, Michael turns to Mickey and says, hey, you guys aren't still working on that Mickey Toontown thing, are you? It's at this moment, Mickey Steinberg, well, he pushes back his chair, gets up, leads Michael Eisner over to the conference room window that overlooks the Toontown. You know, the really big one that's about 70 feet by 50 feet, fully painted, fully complete, ready to go to the field. And Michael is pointed to that model, and the team of Imagineers, and I mean like a team, like 30 people building models, props, prototypes. And ever so slowly, Steinberg turns to Eisner and says, you know, Michael, we ain't just working on Toontown. We've cleared the land down in Anaheim. We finished the site prep. We're building the thing.
If Toontown hadn't been that far along in development and construction, you have to wonder what he would have put there if it wasn't Toontown.
When Michael finally came down to Anaheim as we were doing the final installation of all the props, out ahead of our grand opening in January of 93, Michael's touring the entire land, and he turned to me and said, Shull, I didn't think it'd be this good.
Oh, if Hallmark made a card for backhanded compliments.
How is this man not a therapist? Yeah. God, the sentiment. Yeah. All right.
Speaking of fellow Imagineers, can you please talk about what you and a lot of the original Mickey's Toontown team members did back on in March 2022?
Well, some things you just can't let go. And so as soon as the original team that built Mickey's Toontown heard the news that Mickey's Toontown was going to go down for construction, to reimagine, shall we say, well, we booked a car and we went on down to Anaheim to do one last walk through the land in order to say goodbye.
And by say goodbye, you mean the eBay retirement plan for Imagineers, right? Some souvenirs, maybe?
No, keep your voice down. Keep your voice down. Well, I had my eye on a little certain acorn-shaped fence post top that was in the queue space around the corner where no one could see for Chippendale's Treehouse. If they ever ended up with a count less than one, I know nothing. I see nothing.
Yeah, it needs a forever home, right, Jim?
Yeah, we all need a place to go to rest.
Okay, but since you were involved in the entire lifespan of Mickey's Toontown, how do you feel about the whole retheming and retooling?
As an Imagineer, frankly, a lot of things get built don't last forever. And so when I design, I know if my design is going to endure and, hang around for a couple of decades, it needs to allow for change. It has to become a permanent collection of the DNA of a Disney park. And that means it has to speak across generations. And the things in Mickey's Toontown that I designed with that idea in mind, well, those ideas are staying. Guests will still catch a ride in Lenny the Cab. Children will still experience their first coaster, and everybody in the family can still meet Mickey. The thing that I've always enjoyed most about Mickey's Toontown since it opened is going down to Anaheim and looking at guests as they exit Mickey's garage. I stand and I watch their eyes light up as soon as they see Mickey's car parked on his driveway. Children will make a beeline for the car. They climb in, they pose for a picture, as a certain someone, my son, did in this image when he was a young child. Because you see, memories are permanent and memories are irreplaceable. And I'm convinced to my bones that Mickey's Toontown will continue to make memories for families for decades to come. And as a designer, I count that as the ultimate success.
That's a great story, Jim. And we have more stories to tell, right? So what's coming up on the next Disney Unpacked?
How do you feel about really fast cars? Because next time on Unpacked, we're going to tell the inside story of Rock and Roller Coaster, all 2.5 of them.
Wait, 2.5? How can there be 2.5 coasters?
Ooh, patience, Len. Put yourself in neutral and come on back for the next edition of Disney Unpacked to learn the answer.
Jim Hill here. If you've been enjoying Disney Unpacked on YouTube, be sure and head on over to Patreon and join our community. Not only will you receive the entire Jim Hill Media suite of podcasts ad-free, but you'll also get bonus episodes of the Disney Dish and, more importantly, the full episodes of Disney Unpacked with more stories from Jim Shull, Len Testa, and I. By joining our Patreon, you are helping us continue to evolve our entertainment offerings and are part of the team. We can't wait to show you some of the other ideas we've been working on. And if you haven't yet, be sure and subscribe to Disney Unpacked on YouTube. Thanks for watching and supporting the team at Jim Hill Media and Disney Unpacked.